Hey there, welcome to the Coffee and Technology podcast brought to you by Cropster. Today we speak with Rob Hoos. Rob Hoos is a world-renowned coffee roasting consultant based in Portland, Oregon. Rob is the author of Modulating the Flavor Profile of Coffee and is also the founder of Iteration Coffee. We'll talk to Rob about his post-COVID approach to coffee consulting, the value of technology for remote roast consulting, and his plans with Iteration Coffee. Hope you enjoy. So Norbert, tell me about your first experience with Rob Hoos, the great Rob Hoos of the coffee industry. I'd love to hear a little bit about that story.
Yeah, Rob is a legend, and I'm so grateful to have him here today. The first experience, after thinking back, I think not so familiar those days where Loring came up and we had some questions of like, how can you install Cropster on a Loring? And I think that was my first memory of when we started talking. And then, of course, they're more in depth, like, oh, there's this fantastic book about roasting, and there's so much good information coming out of the Northwest. I want to get closer. I want to hear more, and those are kind of my first memories. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, with that, Rob, welcome to the podcast. I hope what Norbert said is pretty in line with how you first met him. But
I was wondering if he remembers. I think it was, I can't remember whether it was a coffee fest or it was a SCA show. But one of those shows, I think it was even before I published a book, I ended up chatting up with you and Martin. And I was trying to draw my ideas about roast curve stuff like on a box, because that's all that I had. It was like a box, but I think I was carrying business cards around it or something like that. And I remember like drawing roast curves and sitting down with Martin. And I think then you came over as well, and we were trying to chat up. And you're probably just like, who the hell's this bearded guy who's just being weird right now?
It was a super exciting time because we really got to know so many great people at that time. We went to those trade shows, we went to those events, and there were literally hundreds of new people for us to get to know, to understand where they're all coming from. And that I loved that time. I still love it, going to those shows. I miss it now. After 2 years, it's time to go back.
Yeah, that's my first memory. But yeah, we've also met up a few times outside of that, so it's hard to say when the first one really was.
Well, no, welcome, Rob. I think with that, it'd be really cool, to hear a little bit from you now. Last time we spoke, you told us a little bit about now you're basically 100% remote in consulting, and I'd love for you to just kind of walk our listeners kind of through your journey from your time when you started in coffee to director of coffee at NOSA, and now 100% remote consultant. I think it's a fascinating journey, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to it as well.
Sure, happy to. So I started as a barista, as many of us did in the roasting industry, and I started as a barista in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Nice.
Worked there through college, and then after I got done with college, decided that I actually preferred working as a barista to what I studied in college. Almost got a master's in. So ended up working as a barista at a cafe in Cincinnati that had a roaster, and was really fascinated with roasting and just excited to kind of take control of that aspect of coffee and be able to see what was there. And so I did both for a while. We had a quasi-automation system. So I would be roasting as well as baristing. So I'd go from making a panini sandwich and a couple lattes over to the roaster. And shamefully, I think I left the charge gate open so many times, and so smoke would come out the hopper, and I'd be like, "Oh crap!" and have to run over and close the hopper real quick. All that sort of stuff. And,
oh no,
too much multitasking, more than I would ever recommend anyone else doing. But after time, found a job in Portland, Oregon, and before then, I had saved up some money and decided to purchase my own 1 kilo roaster because I wasn't really able to do as much exploring of coffee roast profiles as I wanted to, with the company I was with, because it was really, a lot of it was about just making coffees the way that we had currently made them. And while I had some creative control, they didn't really want me ruining too many batches. So I purchased a 1 kilo roaster, and it took them forever to get it done. So they ended up shipping it out to me when I moved to Portland. But I moved to Portland and started at NOSA. And Augusto, the owner of NOSA Familia, has always been very encouraging and just very supportive of any amount of work that I wanted to do outside of NOSA. And so basically was able to put my roaster in their space and vented it out a window and just started roasting any kind of samples I could get my hands on, and then ended up doing all the book experiments there at NOSA, just during my off hours. So I'd get done roasting for work, and then I would start roasting to do the experiments for the book, and I'd come in the next day and do the cuppings, and on and on and on. So it was really great to have that much support from Gusto. And I worked there for nearly 10 years at NOSA as the director of coffee, helping get their coffee program launched, bringing in origins outside of Brazilian coffee, which they were purely Brazilian until I started bringing some of the origins in that I worked with. And just really had a great time with them for a long time. And Augusto even was supportive of me starting consulting. And so after I met with the Loring folks and after I'd done some work with the SCA and kind of got my consulting business started, because my first time really doing anything teaching-wise was Ildi Revi of the SCA. She was the director of education years ago. And she just really took a shine to me and saw my ability to teach. And so she called me up out of the blue and said, hey, we're doing a class in China. Do you want to go teach it? January of 2013. And I was like, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. It was like my first time teaching the SCA curriculum and anything. So I had a lot of studying to do and making sure that I had everything underneath me. And it was long days because we're going through a translator. Mm-hmm. So we were doing probably 14-hour work days, translating stuff ahead of time, translating stuff afterwards, grading tests afterwards, which we have to go through the translation process both ways. So after that, ended up working with NOSA for a long time and doing consulting as well. So whenever I wasn't consulting, I was working at NOSA. Whenever I wasn't working at NOSA, I was consulting. And published the book, which increased the consulting quite a bit and the traveling quite a bit. And then as the pandemic started, obviously everything kind of stopped, and got a chance to reevaluate my life and, see that, I had always kind of construed myself as this really big family guy, and I realized that I was failing my family in many ways. And so the decision came about, especially after seeing during the pandemic how much I was able to do remotely, which, consulting has been going on remote for me pretty much the whole time, whether it's just talking with people or running their roasters completely remotely in a different country even. I was able to do so much that way, and then the luxury and the luck of being able to find a space and build out the roastery that you see behind me to bring people to teach. And so the realization was just like, I don't need to travel anymore, and I can show up for my family in a way that I haven't been able to before. So that was kind of my journey. And then at a certain point, NOSA said, hey, we need you for 15 hours a week. And I was like, that's way too many hours, because the consulting's taking up so much time. And they said, well, how about then we'll just hire you as we need you as a consultant, and kind of parted ways in a very amicable way. So
that's amazing.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's amazing. Yeah. No, so one thing it came to my mind that I wanted to ask really quick, because so as a consultant now, it makes me think when you had that conversation with NOSA in the beginning, to expand their origins outside of Brazilian coffee. For me, that's fascinating, because now as a consultant, how do you approach that conversation with a lot of your clients now who are maybe not set in certain origins, but are not as necessarily exposed to other origins or willing to offer other origins? And what's the approach to that conversation? Because I think it's interesting if you can get roasteries to expand what their offerings are. And that's very specific.
And that's a tricky question too. With NOSA, it was a bit different because it was part of my hiring. So I was basically able to say, like, I can't work with just one origin. I've got these relationships with Guatemala that I've had for years, and I'm unwilling to come over if I can't bring them. Because one thing that I feel very strongly about this is I don't want the coffee industry to ever become cookie cutter. I don't want people to know that I've worked with a client because they say, oh, Rob Host's fingerprint is all over this company. The diversity in our industry, I think, is something worth celebrating. And so one of the really big things for me as a consultant is I only offer help where help is requested. And so if somebody's like, hey, like, I'm really interested in exploring origins that I've never tried before, then it's like, cool, let's do this. But if somebody's like, I buy from Colombia, Brazil, and El Salvador, and that's it, and I don't want to buy anything else, and I'm like, cool, let's work within that framework and figure out how we can make
Interesting.
the coffees work for you. So, because a big part of it too is like, I'm a very specific type of consultant. I just help people learn how to roast. And so,
Mm,
um, even if it's a style of roasting that I don't like personally, like it's not what I'm going to go to, I will help you do it the way that you want it done. Because what's most important to me is helping the client have success with what they want, and not necessarily with what I want. So
That already
that's why it's a
that
hard question.
already is a very I have a follow-up question on that. So is there a line Rob Hoos is not crossing, where it would say, yes, well, you can do whatever you want, but also it goes totally against my beliefs or against physics or something where it's like, no, I don't want to support that.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me would be, um, in the past where I've run into people who want to buy really, really low quality
Mhm.
coffee. I've definitely been like, that's, you're so price sensitive on this. I don't feel like I can really help.
Mhm.
Um,
mm,
I would object to anybody I found out treating farmers unfairly due to pricing. Um, so
Mhm.
often it can be a race to the bottom, and I'm not comfortable or okay with that.
mm.
Roast profile wise, I've taken people to the edge of fire
Uh-huh.
on purpose. I think my record end temp is in the 490 Fahrenheit without it catching on flames. So um, roast profile wise, I have what I like, but I'm willing to help people do what they want. But when it comes to, I think, fairness and equality and some of those goals,
Mhm.
that's where I would probably draw the line.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so I went down to Mexico a few times, many times, and I saw a very interesting thing down there where they put in sugar at the end of the roasting process, torrefazione or something like that. I don't know exactly
Mhm.
what it's called. Is that something you can consult on? Is that the line?
I have no experience with it, so I would probably just tell them that, like, if you want to ruin your equipment by throwing sugar in there, you wouldn't ruin it, but like for us, especially coffee folks, it would potentially ruin the
Yeah.
equipment. Um, and so I've actually been around a roaster that there was a company where they had a roaster that they did that
Hmm.
on, but they brought me down to consult on the specialty side.
Hmm.
So I have no experience, and that's something I need to be better about, because from a conceptual point of view, like I can figure out a lot of it. Coffee roasting just makes sense to me. So like the torrefaction stuff, I could probably figure it out, but I would have to be honest with people and say like, I am probably not the best fit for that because I have no idea. I would be learning alongside of you, sort of thing.
Is this a thing in the US? Have you seen companies doing it here?
Not in the US,
Mhm.
no. I've not seen it. I'm sure that there are people doing it,
Mhm.
but
Nice, nice. No, that's fascinating. Maybe you could help us visualize a little bit now. Um, as a 100% remote consultant, what does that look like now compared to what that looked like before? I mean, what's kind of like the process you go through now that's changed from before?
yeah. So I mean, before a lot of times people would just kind of insist on having me out in person, and I think that there is still some value to that. Like there is a big time delay, obviously, between cuppings now. So if we roast coffee remotely and then you send me coffee to cup, there's that time delay. I'm not there with you with the roaster pulling the dryer and stuff like that. Um, so I guess on the one hand, what things looked like before is people would fly me out. I would work with them in person, be able to give them real time feedback. 2, 3, 4 days together, roasting coffee all day long, and then come back. The biggest difference is, with technology in particular, I use Zoom and I'm able to use the screen share and the remote control function over it. And so I'm basically
Mhm.
sitting as you see me now, or don't see me since you're on the podcast, but as you would see me if you were watching this right now. I'm in my, it's basically a detached 2-car garage that's full of roasters and roasting equipment. And I sit here, and over Zoom, I'm able to remote control people's roasters, whether it's using a virtual network client, like to tap into something, or using like Cropster's replay functionality where I can control the burners and airflow and everything through that. And just, I always have Cropster up at least as a window, even if I'm using a virtual network client to control. And we're data logging together. We're doing everything together. The only thing that I really need someone on the other side to help me with is obviously the physical parts of like loading the green coffee, getting the roasted coffee out. Usually giving me some cues about smell and about color. Sometimes they'll show me in the camera what the color is. I've definitely done some where we've got two screens going, so they'll use their phone and they can use their phone camera to kind of zoom in on what's going on around while screen sharing. So that works out really well also. And then post roast data metrics. So taking weight loss measurements, color meter measurements, all that sort of thing. And I've had some really amazing amounts of fun and some really super successful roasts with people in totally different countries, sometimes even on the other side of the world, where I just drive the roaster for them and we do the metrics and then they send me the coffee and it's outstanding. But it's really nice to know that I can get to someone, number one, faster, because there's not this delay of finding a time where I could travel, booking flights, booking hotels, all that sort of stuff, and then coming out. I can do it tomorrow, right? And it also reduces the cost pretty significantly, which is great because international flights aren't cheap. So I guess those are the major differences.
Would you say, so when you were there, you were saying, well, sometimes you had hours and hours of roasting, and you would do like a lot of iterations. Is that the same online, or would you rather say after 2-3 hours, like, let's take a break? Because I feel like when I'm online, it takes a little bit more focus, which is great because I'm more focused and I'm more in what I'm doing, but I'm also getting more tired. After like a 2-hour meeting, I need a break, for example, or I feel it.
Yeah, I would say generally I only do about 2-hour sessions with people roasting. It's enough to get 3, maybe 4 batches done with all the kind of like talking and planning that goes on ahead of time. I've usually not gone beyond that. Yeah, at a time, because as you said, it gets really, and honestly, I think most of the time people have their own lives and their own businesses to run. And when you bring a consultant in from somewhere else and you have to do these long 8-12-hour days, then it becomes this like interruption to their life too, because they have to put all their business aside or personal life aside to get the work done they can while people are there. So it's a bit more natural this way, I feel like.
So you would just connect a few times over a certain period of time instead of like having this like one really intense session. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes too, when people get new copies, there's one client in particular that hires me on about once a month to do a 2-hour remote session. So then they get new copies and we kind of work on them together. And sometimes they'll send me copies, sometimes not, depending on the cost of international shipping at the time. So.
I think you're the only one who is fully remote right now, at least from in the consulting world. I don't know if how many others took that. I would say almost extreme step, but I really like it, and I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, definitely. So I am curious though, being that there's still a large group of people, not just in the coffee industry, but in the world that are still skeptical of remote work and tech and whatnot. So I'm wondering if you've come across or if you've had any challenges of like, the element of trust and the human connection with remote work, and if you have, like, have you been able to overcome that those kind of barriers that the other side may feel or might face, or you might face?
I will say that the tech side can be difficult. So if someone's not as tech savvy, sometimes even getting the right programs installed and knowing how to open them can be an issue. That being said, I think for most people, they kind of self-select. So people that would have trouble with remote work would probably either come here for consulting. So either come to my space directly and do in-person classes. The same offering some in-person classes, masked distance with the air filter running. They'd either do that, or they would probably just self-select as to not approaching me. I mean, there are tons of wonderful consultants that are out in the world. You know, Scott and Morton, all these amazing people who do travel still. And I think that if somebody really needed to have someone come out in person, they'd do well to have someone like Dan Cooper or Morton Minchow or Scott Rayo come out and work with them in person. So I think a lot of people kind of self-select that way.
You're also you don't shy away from recommending others as well, other consultants. I noticed that on your website, and I found that very inspiring that you do that. So
You
hats
found
off
my
to you.
roasting buddies page.
Yeah. I did a
Most
little
people don't
digging.
travel that deep into the website, you know?
No, but I mean I found that like really inspiring and nice because a lot of times in the coffee industry that I've come across is that it's always like you gotta hide. You gotta hide a lot of things and everything's a secret. And for you as a consultant so well known, it's like, hey, no, if I can help you, there's plenty of other great people out there that can. And I think that more of that is important for the progress of the industry for sure.
Well, and it's part of the mindset too, right? Something that I've been having to learn in my own personal life is like this mentality of abundance, and that it's, you know, uh, in therapy speak, it's the power over mindset versus a personal power mindset, right? Like in power over, there's a winner and a loser,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. Instead of multiple winners. And I think that the reality of our world is there's so many people who roast coffee that like I'm not ever going to serve all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, with the number of consultants we have, we'd be lucky if we were able to serve all of them. So it's just kind of this. There is an abundance of people that are interested in help, and who am I if I don't help point them in the right direction?
Yeah, I also think you're onto something very interesting by having those relationships and collaborations almost, even if they're not formal. But as you say, some people need someone physically there. And maybe that's just one part of it. And then I can see your name change from roasting consultant to roasting mentor. But I don't know if that's a thing. And well, the reason I say that is because so I take some classes online and I took some classes in person, and I had to go there, and that was pre-pandemic, of course. So every Tuesday or whatever I would drive to those classes, and that's awesome. And then I met a nice group of people, but sometimes it was really just get there, do the class, go home. And then pandemic hit and everything moved online, and now I see how awesome that is to not have to drive, to not have to go there. And instead of doing one class a year, I can do 5 classes. They're so much more efficient. They are so much more um, less intrusive, as you say, into my personal life, because that hour and a half I can easily give. But with traveling, it would be 2.5 hours, maybe more. It's just more thing. And that's why I think like checking in with what you just mentioned with your customer, like every month there's a check-in. That to me is kind of a mentoring thing almost. Like you can do this for a long time, and I guess the cost is also in a certain range, versus flying someone out every month would be probably not an option. So there's, I guess, different markets for different things.
I love the word you use, mentorship. I think that we've taken this class and this kind of Western teaching approach of like, oh, you come and you sit in a class and then you walk away and you know how to do roasting. As anybody who's tried to learn roasting or anything knows, or even like back when I was a barista, you don't just read about how to make the perfect cappuccino and then make a perfect cappuccino. You make thousands of okay or not good cappuccinos first, right? And roasting, I think, is definitely more of that. It needs that mentorship thing. And it's really hard to figure out how to meet people where they're at, because the people that need to learn are business owners themselves, and they don't have the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's either you don't have the time, or you don't have the money, or you don't have the position, right? So to find people that have the time, money, and position usually requires something different. So I do think mentorship is part of what needs to happen. Classes have been the only thing that's been convenient.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this long-term mentorship does need to become more of a thing in terms of how we educate people in the coffee industry.
And I think a lot of business owners need mentorship, right? And those are out there. There's companies doing that. I like to check in with our CPA every 3 months, right? And there's always questions, and of course there's email, and we use that too. But before it was more like, can you drive out there? Again, I would have to drive half an hour, be there a little bit earlier. Then there's an hour meeting, another half hour, and a lot of wasted time and gas. And so now they are all like, yeah, we Zoom, of course, right? Except for some, like once a year, maybe we sit down, but then we go for lunch, right? Then it's more like a social, let's realign, let's see what's going on in our lives. And that's great too.
Yeah.
But for the like the business, it's like I just need a few answers answered, a few questions answered, and we can do that easily on the camera.
Enjoying this episode of the Coffee and Technology podcast? This podcast would not be possible without the support of Cropster. Whether it's tracking harvest yields, roastery and inventory management, or simply tracking brew recipes, Cropster Origin, Cropster Roast, and Cropster Cafe can help you streamline your workflows and help you operate more efficiently. So one thing that makes me think of as well is, in the beginning you mentioned that with being 100% remote work, that you're now able to spend more time with your family, and you're able to strengthen your relationships that are important to you. And that's something I found that I am learning, and not that I'm struggling with, but I find that with remote work, I found it harder for myself now that I have more time to squeeze in things, that I tend to forget about the other things that were important to me or are important to me. So I'm wondering if you found that to be a challenge for yourself, given that, you have reason behind why you're now 100% remote, and that how you've been able to still balance now that, yeah, you have more time, but remembering that you want to still keep those things that are important in your life as top priority.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of restructuring for me, which has been really good. Kind of that personal journey of trying to figure out what is important and making the changes you need in order to like honor that and treat it well in your life and overcome stuff from your own past even, right? So I guess for me, I don't know, it's just been an entire reprioritization.
Cool.
Like, I'm excited. I get to drop our kids off at school every morning. I pick them up. It's at school every evening. I even dropped our dog off at daycare this morning. I get to pick him up here in a little bit. So, but part of it's been part of it's been a lifestyle change. Like, when we moved, we didn't just move somewhere with a detached 2-car garage. We're out in the country now, so hopefully the internet is providing you decent enough sound, because I think our maximum speed is like 20 megabytes per second out here. But we've got 5 acres of woods that get to tear around with the dog and the kids out there, and we went sledding down the hill and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's kind of been a reshuffling altogether for us, just in general. So
I mean, it's a pondering kind of question, because I ponder this every day as well, and I'm sure Norbert does.
Yes, I do, and I think they also those needs change a little bit through life, right? Kind of older I get, the less like parties I need. For example, I still want to go and I still want to meet my friends, but it's I don't know, it's quieter in a certain sense. I still love traveling. That's definitely something I miss a little bit, but I can do my fair share of it. Yeah, and I think we're kind of this again in this back transition phase right now after 2 years of not going out so much and being very careful of going kind of back into life and understanding what that can be. And it's so I really like the new things which came out, like Rob's offer. Fantastic. It's a new thing, right? It wouldn't happen 2 years ago. Maybe it would, who knows? But maybe it was more like that pandemic helped a little bit. Or I see companies who were totally not digital and now registering something with the government, and now this is the only thing you can do. Like I was amazed. I went to the DMV the other day, and I usually that's a very long project to go there and sit around and wait. And they're so streamlined now. It's amazing. So it's really some things have changed to the better.
And I did think too, one other thing that's been really helpful for timing has been that I identified that I was addicted to social media and just quit it cold turkey. And you would be surprised how many hours you get back in your day to do other things and be present. when you don't have your phone out. That's been insane, that learning curve.
Yeah, that's
Oh, that's amazing.
that's pretty wild. Can you afford that as a consultant to not be on social?
So I post through a third-party app so that I'm not, I don't get stuck browsing because all I can do is post.
Mhm.
And I can see comments and respond to comments, but I can't even see direct messages. So I had to put on my thing like, I don't get direct messages, like
Mhm.
email me. And so far, it's been really bizarre because even though I'm posting somewhat irregularly and my interactions has gone down, my number of followers has continued to grow quite steadily, over 11,500 now or something ridiculous,
Amazing.
which a whole bunch
Congratulations.
of people misspending their time, I would say. But you know, it's weird because I do need social media to help get the word out on a lot of the things I'm doing, and I'm hoping people appreciate when I put out word that like, oh, hey, I'm doing this, or hey, here's this free talk, or here's this product that I've got for you to hopefully help you learn roasting better and that sort of thing. And I told myself for the longest time, oh, I'm on social media for my job, and really I was just wasting time. Um, and it doesn't seem to have hurt yet.
Mhm.
All the justifications that I had for myself were probably crap. So,
Mhm.
um, and I'm still going through this third-party app. So,
Very cool. Congratulations. I'm I'm not a very addicted person to those things anyway. I never or hardly ever post anything. I just don't. I like my phone. I like to like see things and news and stuff, but not posting. Um, but yeah, I think that can a lot of time can go away when you're constantly posting stuff. Nick, what's your
I could
take?
I could learn I could absolutely learn a lot from you, Rob. I could take a lot out of this conversation for sure because I could do less on social and not come up with the excuses on why I was on Instagram or whatever. um, but no, so Rob, if you could maybe tell us a little bit about kind of shifting a little bit, iteration coffee.
yeah,
Um, I want to hear a little bit about that and make sure people know what that is and what's coming as well with that.
yeah. So, iteration was kind of uh, it's a mixed bag. It's part of it is wanting to showcase some of the stuff in the modulating book in a way that people can actually taste. Part of it is because I'm remote, wanting people to be able to taste and experience what I'm tasting and experiencing firsthand. Um, Part of it is me just wanting to explore coffees. One of the nice things about having all this roasting equipment and having the time, and I'm the one in charge of purchasing, and I wanted to explore coffees that I remembered as being great, coffees I've never had before, coffees that I've drank all the time. So the basic idea of the iteration is I find a coffee that I want to purchase for some reason or another, whether it's an outstanding light roast, I think they'll do a great dark roast, I want to use it as a blend, whatever it is. And I present to the people that buy into the box set 5 roasted samples, each of them with a different profile, and a green sample so that you can take that and roast it on your Kawa or your BRZ or whatever, and sample roast and taste the coffee that I tasted. And then I take everyone in the notes through the journey of here was my initial sample roast of the coffee. Here's all the metrics behind the coffee. Here was my first approach at roasting the coffee. Here's what I liked, didn't like. Here's what I changed and why. Here's my second approach, third approach, so on. So you end up getting all of these screen grabs of Cropster graphs and everything compared back and forth, and really using all this data to try and showcase to people, number one, like, why did I choose to roast this coffee this way? What kind of data am I taking? How is that data important? How am I using that data to make decisions? And ideally, at the end of the day, you just get to taste my whole thought process behind where I wanted to go with the coffee. And it's really fun too, because actually all 3 of them so far, my third iteration has been my favorite. And the other 2 after that, fourth and fifth, are just like, well, I've got extra stuff, so let's explore a little bit and see what we can get. I'm going to try and take a more roundabout approach this way, so I don't like the coffee perfectly until maybe 4 or 5.
Mhm.
But it's really funny too because people will be like, that one wasn't my favorite. I like this one, and that's kind of the idea behind it. Is I know people aren't going to like the one that I like the most every single time. That would be weird, and really boring too. And so the other thing that we do is everybody gets included on a Slack group that buys into the box set. So we're all, real time talking about what we're tasting together over Slack, and you're like, oh, I really like this. Oh, I didn't like this. How did you do this? Or how would you roast it this way? So been able to feature so far a natural Ethiopian coffee, a washed Ethiopian coffee, a washed Papua New Guinea. And then I've got the next one coming up is from Colombia, just a really nice washed Colombia. And so going to keep going with that. I've got in mind, I've got a Brazil coming soon, looking into Peru right now. And really, I just want to explore as many origins and types of coffee as humanly possible, just to enjoy flavors and explore how I would approach roasting coffees differently, and try and teach that through not only presenting information and data, but then also giving them the opportunity to taste that.
And what's the target audience for that offering?
Yeah, other coffee roasters. So people that roast coffee ideally could purchase into it, like professional coffee roasters or home roasters, and then kind of use that information to approach those coffees similarly, or just learn about the process and maybe be able to apply some of the fundamental ideas that way. It's been fun. We've had some people literally buy the same green coffee and use some of those roasts as a pattern to go off of. We've had some people kind of cross apply it to different coffees that they're working with that are the same origin and processing method. And it's been really cool seeing their wheels kind of click and be like, oh, you did this because this and this, and even answering each other's questions on the Slack groups, which is really fun. There's been one person in particular who just does a great job, and they just jump in like even before I can get to it, especially since I've been leaving my phone lay around now more. Like there'll be a question and then an answer from this person. And I'm like, I think I jokingly said at some point, I should just hire you so that I don't have to, but it's awesome to see. It's awesome to see people learning and grabbing ideas and being able to cross apply them and answer each other's questions. So I really enjoy that.
What about end consumers who are curious?
Yeah, that could totally work too. I think that's just outside of my general normal reach. And so like end consumers could totally buy it and enjoy it. I just don't know how many of those I have access to in terms of when I post like across social media or through my email groups. How many of those people are just curious consumers, right?
I mean, this model is really interesting to me because to me, at the fundamental base of it, it's kind of like this balancing of data, using data and balancing beliefs. Like, you use the data to showcase these coffees in a way, but you also have reasoning as to why you did certain things. But then it also gives the other side the opportunity to look at the data and then also, based on the data and based on everything you said, they can create their own belief on or I guess I don't know if belief's the right word, but their approach to their own personal approach to how they would approach certain things. And for me, I found that fascinating, and not just being 100% data driven, but also not being 100% belief driven. And it's like this balancing act. That's fascinating. So
I love that you said that. I think that there's like, if there's one thing I would go back and change about the way I presented myself in the beginning with the book, I'm not a scientist. And I think a lot of times in our industry, we present things as if they're so black and white. And I remember trying really hard not to do that in the first book. But I think that coffee roasting is a craft. Like there is science behind it. Obviously, there has to be, because science underpins everything that happens in the universe. And if we research enough, we can understand it. But I think right now, a lot of it is more like a craft where, we have access, thanks to like Cropster and thanks to color meters and thanks to all these things, we have the ability to analyze data in such an amazing way now that we never had before. But we also have to realize the limitations of some of that data, like that isn't the fault of anyone. A thermocouple is a thin piece of metal shoved in a mass of swirling beans that have hot airflow moving through them and radiative heat energy. A thermocouple is not the end-all be-all of temperature measurement for beans, but it's the best we've got, right? And so there is this element of knowing like, oh, my air temperatures are a little bit hotter than normal, which means I should probably end my bean temp 1 or 2 degrees hotter so that I can come out at the same color. And you can't really program a machine to know that. It's just kind of, you know, that from doing it over time. There is this craft aspect. There is pulling the trigger to evaluate the smells of coffee to know when to drop it for that first time, and then figuring out how to use the data to replicate after that, after you've made these initial decisions, right?
Yeah.
And it is a bit of a belief. Like, other people have different beliefs on coffee roasting, and that's awesome because right now none of us really know completely for sure, and anybody who says they do is probably not being completely honest with themselves. Um, and I think that what's funny is I think most of the consultants and people that teach coffee roasting come with the same sort of idea, and it's the people that read our writings that become more fanatical than we are, even, and more critical. Um, in the past couple of weeks, I've seen people ridiculing other people for their approach, and then citing some resources that I've created in order to back themselves
Mm-hmm.
up. And I feel like that's a real problem
Mm-hmm.
because, like, I'm not a text for you to justify your quasi abusive behavior toward other people.
Right.
There's no right or wrong really in coffee roasting. There's ideas, and like you said, beliefs. And some of them are founded, and some people would say that they work really well, and other people would disagree and say that this other person's ideas work better. And, you know, I think that we have to be able to have a discourse while realizing that we're also still just turning beans brown, and it's not all that serious at a certain level. Like, it's serious, it's business, and we care about it, but like, is it worth slandering other people's intelligence? No. Just let them be. If you disagree with them, let them alone. Let them roast coffee the way they want, and let them have a business. You know.
I guess that's
So
never a good thing to do in any situation. If you have your own opinions, then follow them and make them popular if you want to, or can make them big, or just follow them. And
yeah,
that doesn't mean you have to fight others. It's also a very interesting dynamic. I find that why do you even care about the others? In the end of the day.
I mean,
yep,
it goes back to like kind of, I think, the 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 traditional kind of discussion around the majority of American coffee consumers like dark roasted coffee. And while that's never my preference or something I would recommend to my friends, like, I also don't believe that alienating that group, that large majority of coffee consumers, is the right way to go about a lot of it. So yeah.
and that's the hard thing. Sometimes we do it under the auspice of we're educating them. It's like, you're not educating them. You're shaming them for liking dark roasted coffee. There's a small difference, you know.
Yeah,
What I
absolutely.
like most is when people can identify things how they are on their own, and that usually
Mm,
happens when you give them options and opportunities to refine their thinking. And I think I brought it up at one time earlier already in one of the podcasts, or at least this is one of the milestone experiences of my coffee, with like specialty coffee thing. When we put in that was 15 years ago in Colombia, we exchanged the coffee in a factory cafeteria from really bad one to specialty. Specialty back then was not even a thing in Colombia, and we had the perfect test, right? Like, will those people first of all notice and they like it? And first of all, they noticed, and the notice was like, oh, why is the coffee different? And it was kind of stressful, and it's a change. So the change was noted, and it was not necessarily like, oh, this is great. It's like, no, where is our other thing? And then after 3 weeks, we switched it back to the old thing, and that's where the feedback came. It's like, oh my god, what happened to the coffee? It got really bad. So yes, there was a noticeable difference, and I can hear that from my friends who, or whoever visits me for more than a week. they just drink what I have at home, and then suddenly go back to their old homes, to their old habits. And then they sent me this message like, you ruined me, Norbert. Now I have to pay triple what I paid before, but I really love it.
Yeah.
But that's all. And then the occasional dark roast in a diner or somewhere can be also very enjoyable. So I'm not. It all depends. I mean,
Sometimes it does the job though. Middle of the country, in the middle of a highway, got to get the caffeine.
Well, not only that, there's the ambiance thing too. That's one of the things that I struggle sometimes with within newer specialty coffee is like, I miss the grungy 90s, early thousands cafe experience. Where it's just like you go in, all the furniture's old and mismatched. There's random books everywhere. And yeah, the coffee wasn't super great, but the experience of going there like totally was. And the new clean aesthetic is great too. It's just, all over.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And maybe that's an invite for some of our listeners to think about putting another coffee shop in, which has a little bit the old feel, but with a little bit of better coffee. And maybe that can go together, actually.
It's true.
Balance. I love it. Life is a balance. Just like coffee. No, fascinating stuff, Rob. I appreciate you taking the time to shed your knowledge and share your knowledge with our listeners and us. And it's exciting. And I thank you for it.
It's been a pleasure, and hopefully some of my path and my experience has been helpful for people. So
yeah, I appreciate all your work, all your kindness, all your input into the coffee world, and all your friendship we had for a long time. So I look forward to more, and thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Coffee and Technology Podcast. To learn more about Cropster, subscribe to this podcast and follow us on social media. For more educational content, visit cropster.com/learn.